Hey guys, V-Man from No Budget Productions, and on this week's edition of Figure It Out, we are going to be doing the next generation version of Torres. Now, this figure was never released. In fact, I don't think this character was ever even put out in any fashion in this uniform. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the character was in the Academy and then went to the Maquis and then was in the Voyager uniform once I got to the Delta Quadrant. So I never think she actually was in a Next Generation uniform. However, this being a custom figure, um, and part of the fun of doing custom figures is just letting your imagination run wild. So that being said, um, since I had the spare parts available, I decided, man, what the hell, why not? And that's part of the fun of doing things like this is seeing things that you never thought you would see, kind of a multiverse of action figures. So that being said, this is what the figure looks like. And I actually think this is one of the more stunning of the figures that I've done. It's a beautiful looking action figure, and that's by no way a reflection of me. I think it's just because Playmates made some really good fucking figures in the 90s. Um, this, of course, is the Playmates Voyager line, the Lana Torres head, and the Tasha Yar Yesterday's in O'Brien's body. But I mean, both those are well sculpted and nicely done. And I think putting them both together, I mean, it looks fucking beautiful. I mean, the Next Generation uniforms looked great anyway, um, which I mean, I think they're beautifully done. It's just a great looking figure. Um, so taking a look at that right there, uh, the thing that I like about this figure is if you didn't know that this was a custom figure, you really couldn't tell about this. And that I do take a lot of pride in. It's one thing when you make a figure and you look at it and you're like, man, that looks fucking great. With some customs, you're like, man, it looks a little off here, it looks a little off. Doesn't quite look right. But with this one, it looks really nice. It looks like you just pulled it out of the box and just started playing with it. You know, um, but this looks great. And it almost makes you wish you had seen that character in that uniform for an episode or something. She looks like she belongs in this uniform right next to Worf. It looks great. Or it like that Klingon lady in Future Imperfect in that episode. She's walking right by Riker, and when Beverly says, Klingons seem to be immune to the disease, and Riker's like, speaking of Klingon, you know, but she looks like she belongs right in that uniform. And as you can tell, like I said, it's great sculpting, and that was the one thing that I really appreciated was the fact that the Playmates they were consistent. Because they went, oh well, is it 5 years, 6 years, something like that, and they were consistent with every one of their action figures. I mean, this was the longest running, if I'm not mistaken, I think this was the longest running line that the Playmates did with it. Anyone did, I think, with Star Trek for action figures. But I mean, they had so many figures, and the thing that was so great about these was you had so many to choose from to customize. Um, and that's, I mean, even today we're still making Star Trek figures. I'm seeing so many in these Star Trek customs groups that are blowing me out of the water. Oh man, like I saw the other day, a great cadet Nog that I'm like, man, I want to recreate that because it was so great. Where I'm like, I never even had that idea, and it just makes you want to go take your hand at, can I recreate that? But this is just such a beautiful figure. And again, it's just because they made it so accessible to do that, and it's similar to how Masters of the Universe Origins you can take the action figure apart and reposition them, put them together, and make your own action figure. And I think that's something where they understand the market for people like myself that want to make their own action figure or want to reposition them in different ways to do them differently. Um, and I mean, it's just to me that's just smart marketing. You know, it opens it up to a brand new audience. So, like I said, I to do this, I took my Belana Torres action figure from the Star Trek Voyager Wave One line, which again, it's fairly cheap to acquire one. But I had plenty on hand because I have tons of these action figures. Because that was one thing that I always wanted to do for Royce is I wanted to pass down my Star Trek action figures to him. You know, of course, I have one carded and I have at least one opened. Um, but I had, if you look at, Belana Torres here from Wave One, you know, it's a very beautiful figure. And that's one thing that, you know, once you take the head of a Belana Torres, you then have that body to then, okay, what do I want to do for this? You know, and then taking the, uh, you know, Tasha Yar head off this, you know, I've then, you know, at that point I was like, well, I could then make a DS9 version of Tasha Yar. Like, what if she had lived? You know, and I did. So at some future point, I will do that show. Because again, that's another variant where it's like, well, what if she had lived and is in a DS9 uniform? Like, what would that look like? You know, and that's also a very beautiful figure. You know, but I took the body from Lieutenant Natasha Yar from yesterday's Enterprise. You know, this was you know, a figure that you know, again, nicely sculpted, but this is the same as the Dr. Pulaski and the Ensign Rowe figure that they had done. It's just different color. And that's one of the things that I felt that they did fairly cheap on these is they made the 1701 figures. They're just basically repaints of things because this is no different than you know, different head on a different body slapped together. Same thing with the tapestry Picard, which is not really tapestry. You know, it's not accurate. You know, it's not screen accurate for Picard because it's got, you know, it's a Generations, you know, Kirk body with Picard head. You know, I mean, if they wanted to be accurate to the tapestry Picard, they would have taken the collar off of Generations Kirk body. You know, so I mean, to me, it's those 1701 figures were kind of crap. You know, because all they were just repaints and head swaps, and to me that, you know, they just weren't any good. You know, and I don't think they ever should have done that. But that was Playmates' attempt to kind of get into the collector market. And I feel like that's where the line failed ultimately. But as you can see, like I said, that was my Belana Torres in a Next Generation uniform, and I think she looks really good in it. You know, and that was the one thing about the Voyager crew. I wish they would have gotten a chance to be in other uniforms, preferably the First Contact uniforms, because those uniforms were fucking gorgeous, and those are my favorite uniforms. But Next Generation would have been close second. So anyway, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this week's show, and see you next month. So be genuine, be safe, and keep on geeking out, guys.